Welcome to Football Conspiracies.
I'm Jared Cole.
And I'm Jared Rabinovich.
This week's episode, Jim Harbaugh and His Beliefs.
Welcome, listeners. For this week's episode, we're going to be doing one of our classic player beliefs episode, but what you probably gathered from the intro is that we're actually going to be talking about a pretty infamous coach, and his name is Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, you're familiar with Jim Harbaugh, Jared?
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh, the coach of the 49ers, not the coach of the Ravens, right?
That is exactly right. You probably remember that from our Blackout episode. That's right. Yes, exactly. So yes, you already picked up on that. We have spoken about Jim Harbaugh on this podcast before, but not in any extensive way. He was really just a side character in a larger story we were telling about the Blackout.
But he was pretty funny in that story. Like, he had a couple of really good comments about the Blackout specifically.
Most of the comments I think are coming to your mind actually came from his brother, John Harbaugh. Yes, I think Jim was less noted in that story. He had less fun quotes coming out of it. I did go back and look at it, but Jim definitely did play a role in that story. It's just John was the one who shone after becoming the champion of that Super Bowl.
I see.
Yes. But before we get into the quirkiness of this man and the conspiracies that I actually want to discuss in this episode, I just want to do a quick breakdown on who the man is. Who is Jim Harbaugh? James Joseph Harbaugh is a former quarterback and current NFL coach. As of this year, Harbaugh is now the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. Before this, he had one more stint in the NFL, like we previously mentioned, coaching the San Francisco 49ers from 2011 to 2014. During this stint, famously, as we mentioned, he coached the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Ravens, the team his brother, John Harbaugh, had been the head coach of since 2008 and still is to this day. However, the bulk of Jim's fame does not come from his tenure in the NFL. Rather, Jim's fame largely stems from his decade-long stretch coaching the University of Michigan Wolverines, one of the best-known and most successful college football teams in the country. If you have any prior knowledge about Jim Harbaugh's personal beliefs and eccentricities, you probably know exactly why we are speaking about the Chargers coach today. For those who don't, I will give a quick explainer. Jim Harbaugh is a weird dude. There is no other way to put it. As a matter of fact, his particular brand of weirdness is so unusual that I could not find a different episode to speak about him in. He needed one wholly dedicated to himself. In most cases, I prefer to cover a specific conspiracy belief and discuss all the NFL players and coaches who identify with that particular belief. In the case of Jim Harbaugh, this does not suffice. Most players, even the wackier ones like William Hayes, who does not believe in the existence of dinosaurs but does believe in the existence of mermaids, these guys fall into a sort of a mold. After all, Hayes was not the only NFL player I found who shared these beliefs. When it came to Jim Harbaugh, there was no such mold he could be fit into.
So his beliefs are so outlandish that nobody else in the NFL really shares them to the same degree?
I don't want to say outlandish as much as completely absurd. They are based in almost nothing from what I can tell, and it just makes me wonder what this guy's upbringing was like what imbued him with these beliefs, because we'll get into it shortly, but these are things I've never heard from anyone else.
Wow.
Yes, it's truly a journey. So this is obviously why I think that Jim Harbaugh deserves an episode wholly dedicated to himself. Most of the Players and Beliefs episodes are imbued with lessons about the dangers of spaces like NFL locker rooms and their unique ability to turn their inhabitants into hardcore conspiracy theorists. This one, however, will be about the wild quirks of one man who's in charge of one of these locker rooms. I believe looking into the unusual brain of Jim Harbaugh, one of the sport's most celebrated coaches, may help to explain the environment of people the average college football and NFL players are subjected to. So that's what I think the overall thesis of this episode should be looked at. I think the example of Jim Harbaugh does a really good way to explain the kind of mindsets that a lot of these guys go into NFL or college locker rooms with, especially someone like Jim Harbaugh, who spent most of his tenure as a football coach in college football rooms, where these guys are even more impressionable than when they're in the NFL. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, he's really just an example of the sort of craziness these guys are being subjected to, and I think it goes a way of explaining why so many of these guys have conspiratorial beliefs.
Yeah, I'd say it also probably gives him a little bit of an edge in the locker room, too, to connect with the boys when you believe in the wild things that they also believe in.
Yes, and not only that, he is able, by getting in with them, believing these crazy things, he's able to make it more believable that the even crazier things he believes in might be something that they should adopt.
Okay.
And not only that, he's in a leadership position above them, right? They look up to this guy, and from all accounts, he's a really good dude whose players absolutely love him.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic that he sets up in the locker room. And I think it says a lot about what might be going on in other locker rooms. Before getting into a deeper discussion about the peculiar quirks of Jim Harbaugh, there are two incidents in his career that must be discussed further. Much of what will be brought up in this episode are the wacky beliefs of Jim himself, but before getting into that, we need to talk about the conspiracy-adjacent events of his career. As we've previously mentioned, and you guys likely picked up on when we mentioned Jim Harbaugh to begin with, is we previously spoke about him in the 5th episode of our podcast titled Blackout. Like we said, Jim was actually one of the coaches at the infamous 2013 Super Bowl when the lights went out. The other coach was his brother, John Harbaugh. For those who don't remember or have not had a chance to listen to that episode, Jim's 49ers were losing badly going into the blackout in the third quarter of the game. After the blackout, the Niners started a huge comeback. They did eventually lose, but it is still considered one of the greatest turnarounds in NFL history. Because of the large change in performance following the blackout, many conspiracy theorists have posited that it was planned by the 49ers and their coach, Jim Harbaugh, in an attempt to switch up the momentum of the game or get up to some other nefarious act that allowed them to start making their comeback. Well, I personally do not believe, and I think, J. Cole, you agree with this, that Jim Harbaugh had any hand in causing the infamous Super Bowl blackout.
Yeah, he was 100% the 49ers and their fans and the Saints fans, too.
Yes, of course. And if you can't detect the sarcasm in J. Cole's tone, it's because this was a really non-credible theory.
You're right. It was actually Beyonce.
It was actually Beyonce, yes. And the reuniting of Destiny's Child, as we long discussed.
The reuniting of Destiny's Child.
While this is not entirely important to this episode as a whole, I think I would be doing the audience a bit of a disservice by not bringing up this incident during an episode dedicated to Jim Harbaugh. You know, Jim Harbaugh, Conspiracy Football Podcast. This is a necessary detail of the episode. However, there is one more detail from the Blackout episode I have to bring up before moving on, and that is a quote we read from John Harbaugh. I think what J. Cole was remembering at the beginning of this episode. He is obviously Jim's brother and the head coach of the victorious Baltimore Ravens. The quote reads as such.
I do think there was a second shooter for President John F. Kennedy, but I don't necessarily buy into this particular conspiracy theory.
So, I just want to say before I bring up why I brought up this quote, I want to be clear that I don't want to associate Jim with John's conspiratorial beliefs. But I do think this quote from his brother may do something to illuminate the environment and people that Jim grew up around.
Okay, so you think because John also has a little bit of these conspiratorial beliefs that
it's
Jim
not
and John
unlikely
got them from the same place.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think the apple doesn't fall from the tree is a necessarily accurate axiom, but in this case, I would not be shocked if there was some influence in their life that maybe led them down this not conspiratorial but quirky path. Like I'm saying, I this is far from a declarative statement, but I still believe this is a worthwhile detail to explore when speaking about this subject. The next topic we'll be touching on is far less silly than the blackout at Super Bowl 47, and the conspiracies that abounded from that. This is the college football sign stealing scandal that came to light last year. J. Cole, you're familiar with this?
No, I don't really follow college football.
And honestly, neither did I. I had heard of this when it happened vaguely, but I'm not big into the NCAA, and this is not something that really breached my attention sphere.
Don't get me wrong, I pay attention to a lot of the players, but I don't really know how teams are doing in that sort of sense.
I agree.
I know who's good, but I don't really know who's mid and who would beat who,
Exactly. I think we look at it a bit similarly, that it's we care about college football in the sense of we care about how it will one day affect the NFL. Which of these players are going to be big dogs in a few years down the line?
Yeah, it's kind of like we watch it as a feeder league rather than its own separate thing. But college football and college sports are just as crazy. Like sometimes you get like games that are crazier and even better than NFL games.
Exactly.
So,
like no disrespect at all. I just think like as someone who's Canadian, went to a Canadian university, it's a little bit harder for us to like really get in that college peppy spirit that a lot of the NCAA games are imbued with.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about what actually happened during this sign stealing scandal last year. So in 2023, it was revealed that the University of Michigan, the team Jim Harbaugh was coaching at the time, had been illegally stealing signs from opponents' teams. So I know J. Cole is looking at me with a quizzical look right now, and I'm about to explain that all away. I'm going to give you guys a quick lesson on sign stealing in college football. The NCAA does not allow for coach-to-player communication technology, the system that is currently used in the NFL. Right now in the NFL, players and coaches have a way to communicate each other from the sideline to the field, so there's no reason for there to be huddles, and there's no reason for there to be signals between the player and the coach.
Yeah, and it also saves time because the quarterback doesn't have to run all the way to the sideline and run all the way back.
Exactly.
Saves some time.
You understand.
Makes sense for NFL.
Exactly, yeah. And because of this, in confluence with the fact that no-huddle offenses have become much more popular, pretty much the norm in recent years, there's a need for signs to be used for the coach to communicate with the player on the sideline in college football. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of like base stealing in baseball. Like you have the managers and the third base coach and the first base coach, and they're tapping on their nose and their ears, and their eyes and the cap. And
you actually beat me to the MLB reference.
There you go.
So what needs to be understood is this a little more complicated than this, because the NCAA actually doesn't have any official rule against sign stealing. The logic is similar to that of the MLB sign stealing rules. If one is able to decipher the other team's signals without any sort of external aids, then there's nothing stopping this from happening. If I'm sitting on second base and I'm looking at what the catcher's throwing to the pitcher and I'm able to figure out, oh, fastball's coming, and I let my batter know somehow, that's all against the rules. That's fair game.
Yeah, no, if you're using your own sports IQ, that is 100% valid, because that's the reason why you have a leg up in the first place, because you have that high IQ and you can figure out that stuff.
Exactly. It's actually one of the things I like most about baseball, most about sports in general, being able to use this next level IQ that no other person who hasn't spent their entire life in this sport could do, and use it to your team's advantage. It reminds me of when Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if you remember this, he saw a sign being given that there's going to be a fake kick on the Jumbotron. He saw the other team's coach doing it, so he knew it was coming, was able to warn his defense to make sure that it didn't go through.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, this happened a few years ago. I'll see if I can pull it up later. So you guys are probably wondering where the issue arises in this sign stealing scandal. And when the issue does come to be, much like in the MLB that we've seen in recent years, is when a team uses electronic equipment or off-campus in-person scouting of future opponents in order to decipher their signals. Right? You go a step over the line when I start videotaping your signals, or I'm sending someone to your team's practices to see what's going on.
Yeah, going to a practice is a little much.
Or even other people's games, as the NCAA has laid out in their rules.
Well, if the NCAA says it's that going to other games, I guess. But, I mean, a lot of teams do that. They'll send scouts to
For sure.
opponents so they know how to play against them.
Absolutely. Where the controversy comes in is this in combination with electronic equipment.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Yes, even if you are not a part of this specific game, you're still not allowed to use electronics to aid you in stealing signals.
Like, I can't film the game and
That's
then
exactly right.
watch it back later.
Exactly. I can't be, like, specifically filming the coach to be like, oh, what signs are they throwing out, then what play goes through, so I'm able to, decipher their codex.
And I'm going to guess that Jim may have done this.
Actually, it's a little more complicated than that. The details of what took place during the scandal are still under investigation, so the story is not fully fleshed out, but I'm going to try to enlighten y'all with what we do know for certain. Last year, it was discovered that a University of Michigan football team staffer, his name Connor Stallions, fuck yeah, badass name.
It's a good last name.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love the silly names I've come to this podcast so far, and this is one of the top tier ones in my opinion.
Yes, this is the top name.
So Connor Stallions, he had purchased tickets under his own name to somewhere between 20 and 30 NCAA games of his team's opponents. Stallions then sent associates of his to watch these games, asking them to capture the opponent's signals with their phones. These videos were then sent to Stallions and used to decipher the signs of the Wolverines' upcoming competition. I read an article somewhere that said that Stallions had one time said to an associate of his that he had a document that was somewhere between 550 and 600 pages detailing the signs thrown out by his opponent's teams.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot of work.
Oh yeah, this was like a serious operation. And I'm not going to get too into it because it's not relevant to this episode, but for anyone interested, you might want to look a bit into this Stallions character. He's a weird guy. He's an oddball. He was really obsessed with University of Michigan and the Wolverines like pretty much his entire life, and has been like what the articles at least made it seem to be, orchestrating his entire life to end up as a Wolverine staffer. So it must have been like very heartbreaking for all this to be discovered about him.
Yeah, whoa. Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
Yeah, he's a weird character.
Wow, I'm gonna look this up later.
I recommend the audience too. So like J. Cole hinted at earlier about Jim Harbaugh being a fellow conspirator, there actually was no evidence that Harbaugh had any knowledge of this happening while it was going down.
So how could they be punished if they weren't using it? Were they using it?
They were.
Who was using it?
From what I understand, it was given to other coaching staff, but it's, like I said, the details of this case are still very hazy, so we don't really know what was being used with the information, and it looks like there was some sort of collusion between other teams within the Big Ten in order to steal signs and collude with that project with one another. Apparently some people were stealing signs from the Wolverines themselves. Like I said,
this sounds like a full episode. You know what I mean?
Yes, we can absolutely dedicate an episode of this podcast to the sign stealing scandal. I really don't want to get too much into it right now, especially because we don't have this final report yet. We really don't know what happened. But you guys better bet that when that report comes up, we're going to be talking about it, because I think this is probably the biggest scandal to come out of the college sporting world in many years. And I think it's pretty crazy that it's gotten so little attention. So you might be asking now, if Jim Harbaugh was not privy to any of this, why was he in trouble? The NCAA's rulebook clearly states that the buck stops with the head coach. So because of this, Harbaugh was suspended for the final 3 games of the 2023 season, a decision which he chose not to appeal. There are a lot more details of the story, like we have alluded to, but because they don't have much to do with Jim Harbaugh himself, they are not particularly relevant to the theme of this episode. With all that being said, I believe it would be a disservice to the listeners to speak about Jim Harbaugh and not touch on one of the largest scandals of his entire career, if not the largest scandal of his entire career.
Yeah, but I mean, if he is found guilty, the biggest punishment is that he won't be able to coach in college football again. And it's like, whatever, he's already an NFL coach.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like something that's going to be a huge issue for him.
No, exactly.
What we know about Jim Harbaugh's involvement in this is, I don't think this story reflects very poorly on Harbaugh's overall legacy, but it must be mentioned when trying to get a full evaluation of his character. Nowadays, Jim Harbaugh is working for the Los Angeles Chargers, and he seems to have left this scandal in the past. All right, we will now be moving on to the next and most substantial portion of this episode, probably the thing that the audience is going to be the most interested in, and that is Jim Harbaugh's quirks.
So how crazy is Jim Harbaugh's beliefs?
Like I'm going to enlighten you, a lot of this really just is quirky things he's done. Like his beliefs aren't dangerous like a lot of the things that we've seen. You know, like people believing in flat earth and dinosaurs being fake. These lead down to pretty scary ideologies at their root. But Jim Harbaugh's shit, it's just his shit. Like it's ridiculous. It's his own what seems to be like made up little conspiracy theories that have just stuck with him. Yeah. I mentioned earlier that Jim is a truly weird dude. I am now going to make the case for why. It should be mentioned that I'm far from the first person to make this observation of Jim Harbaugh being a very weird dude, but that does not mean the content is any less deserving of this podcast's attention. The first thing I would like to speak about is actually the reason I began looking into Jim Harbaugh in the first place, and that is his interesting relationship with chickens. Have you ever heard about this?
What the fuck? I was not expecting you to say chickens. That's not where that sentence was going in my head.
I understand that, and it's only going to get weirder when we start breaking this down. Do you have any idea what Jim's beliefs about chickens might be surrounded about? Like, even an inkling?
Like, maybe, like something in the food to make them grow bigger so they have more meat so that they can sell them sort of thing, and it's like antibiotics and stuff like that.
That isn't the worst guess. Like, it's definitely not right, but you could have been a lot further off the mark. Famously, or maybe not so famously as I'm now learning, in a 2018 article from the Bleacher Report, former Michigan quarterback Wilton Speight was interviewed about the experience of being on a team coached by Jim Harbaugh. This is one story he relayed.
Early in his Michigan tenure, Harbaugh pulled Speight aside and told him not to eat chicken, a protein that is considered fairly safe by nutritionists. When Speight asked him why, Harbaugh said, "Because it's a nervous bird." He thinks some type of sickness injected its way into the human population when we began eating white meats instead of beef and pork, Speight says. And he believes it, 100%.
Well, Harbaugh did not give any further comment at the time. There are other former players who have claimed this to be the case. This is the same experience they have had. And in later comments he has made, he has confirmed this is the case. He believed that chickens were a nervous bird, therefore his players shouldn't be eating them. What do you think?
That is so funny. Oh my god. But I mean, it's a good source of protein. I don't know why I would tell them not to, but...
As most nutritionists agree, it's a fairly good source of protein.
Yeah, but I mean, you gotta have a code, I guess, and his code is chickens are nervous.
Yeah, it's like I said, you know, a lot of these conspiracies are pretty dangerous. They came from somewhere, and I'm pretty imbued in this conspiracy world. I've seen things from, you know, the mundane to the absolutely crazy, and I've never come across this one. Never.
I've never heard of anyone outwardly not eating chicken because it's a nervous bird, let alone someone saying it's a nervous bird to begin with.
I know, and it's weird, especially because you hear a lot of people being like, oh, I don't eat red meat because it's much worse for you. I only eat chicken.
Yeah.
I only eat poultry. But Jim just, I get it. Like, I mean, look at a chicken. They're pretty nervous birds.
They are nervous birds. Like, you don't hear often about people getting attacked by chickens.
Exactly.
Unless they, like, really had it coming.
And that's why we all got to be eating Canadian geese. All these NFL players would be biting each other on the field. They'd be ferocious. That's what we need.
If Jim truly believes that a bird's mentality will rub off on a player, then please just get rid of all of our geese.
Exactly. Absorb the essence of the geese. We'd have the craziest football players in the world hissing at us on field. So, like we've alluded to, Jim believed that eating chicken, a bird that he considered nervous, quote unquote, may rub off on his players and make them nervous in turn. I find this belief to be so interesting for a couple of reasons. The first one being that he seems to have come to this conclusion entirely on his own. Most of the other conspiratorial beliefs we speak about are popular outside of NFL circles, but in football-themed podcast fashion, we are simply seeking the NFL players who believe it. In this case, it seems Jim is the one and only adherent to the quote-unquote nervous bird theory. He did not seem to pick this up from anyone else.
That's wild. Jim, can we get you on the podcast so we can ask you, like, 1 billion questions? Because I'm sure by the end of this podcast, we're going to have, like, 1,000,000,001.
Yeah, no, like, there's going to be more questions raised, but as far as I'm concerned, this is the most absurd thing he has ever believed or done in his life. It's so crazy to me, and I really can't wrap my head around it.
No, I can't either. Like, a nervous bird rubbing off on its players? Like,
yes.
What?
And now that I think we've roasted him to, you know, a appropriate level, It has to be mentioned that Jim seems to have changed his tune on chickens in recent years. This clip is Jim Harbaugh speaking at a press conference about 9 months ago.
Yeah, Easter. Went to the Tractor Supply, and as before, I think they even shut things down. But with the Tractor Supply, got the chickens, brought them home for Easter, and just little chicks, for kids, and they loved them. They loved those chickens for about a week. The chicks, and then the chicks became teenager chickens, and then became adult chickens, all hens, egg layers. I'm the one who takes care of them, and the respect that I have for chickens. I know there was a time when I said that chicken is a nervous bird. I don't eat chicken. I don't eat meat. But I was dead wrong. I stand corrected. These chickens are low maintenance and high production. They lay an egg every 26, 27 hours, and they need water, they need food, and then I play with them too. I let them out in the yard, and we run around. They're happy to see me. There's times when I'm doing good things for other people, and they're not as happy to see me as my chickens are. So it's good. It's good for my mental health as well. And get fresh eggs every day.
On the left, John.
Highly productive.
So as this clip shows, Jim has kind of completely flipped the script and is now a huge chicken fan. He's big on chicken now.
Yeah, but it seems more he's big on chickens in the sense that he'll raise them, not in the sense that he'll eat them.
Well, he does say something about how they produce a lot of eggs, so maybe he's eating the eggs now, right? It's a step forward.
I mean, technically eggs are chicken, so...
Yeah, you're right.
We're off to a good start here, Jim.
Exactly, and I think he might actually eat chicken now. I think it was a true change of heart. He seems to have denounced all of his previous views.
Okay.
Yes. That being said, I think that is a incredibly noteworthy NFL story and one of my favorite quirks I've heard about any player or coach.
Yeah, that's just so wild.
Yeah, and it's one of these stories that's often reported. There's a lot of players who have had this experience. I find that pretty entertaining. So in their article on this subject, SB Nation asked the most serious question on this topic. Writer Jason Kirk ponders the logic of this opinion. If eating a nervous bird will make you nervous, does that mean we are consuming the souls or essence of the animals we are eating? It's a good question. What do you think?
I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to believe if you believe that eating a chicken will make you nervous.
Yes.
Like if Jim Harbaugh read this and said 100% that is exactly my mentality, I'd be like, that is completely normal and sane, and you're just a little bit religious, and that's okay.
Exactly. I'm really just trying to understand Jim's logic here.
This is the way he has it, because he doesn't have it like that. So.
No, it really does seem like this is his logic behind this theory, though.
That is a wild thing to think about.
Yeah.
Though. Could you imagine?
I really want to know where he got this theory from. I'm begging. What video did he watch? What book did he read? What thing did someone say to him that put him down this path?
Yeah, honestly, I think that if you come out with a theory, you have to give something. I don't care if it's a 4chan meme.
Yes.
Please just show me where you got it.
Yes, absolutely. My final thoughts on the topic is that this is Pythagoras levels of weird eating habits for the two people that joke is for. All right, moving on to our next quirk about Jim Harbaugh. And this took place in 2016. I don't know if you saw this either. I definitely didn't when it happened. Jim Harbaugh planned a sleepover at the house of Quinn Nordin, at the time the country's #1 kicker recruit, in an attempt to win him over to U of M.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
That's so funny. He slept in the house or on the lawn?
I'm just going to let the article tell the story. This following quote comes from Dan Parr at NFL.com.
As Rockford High kicker Quinn Nordin tells it, the coach plans to arrive at Nordin's house at 12:01 a.m. on Friday morning. the exact minute when it's legal for him to contact Norden under recruiting rules. This won't be a quick pop-in visit, though. Harbaugh intends to sleep over at Norden's house. Under the exact rules, he's going to be at my house at 12:01, he said. That's when it's legal for him to be at my house, Norden told Scout.com. He said that we can watch a movie, see how well we gel, and he said we would have a sleepover after that. I was in tears laughing when he said that. He said the next day, if my parents didn't want me to miss school, he would go to every class with me and go to lunch with me. I was laughing so hard. Norden also might have Harbaugh as a roommate for the night, whether he likes it or not. He told me that if I had a 6'3" piece of carpet for him to sleep on, that would be enough, Norden said. I said we have guest rooms, and he said, I'll tell you what, I'll just sleep on the floor in your room. I said, Coach, I have Penn State stuff all over my walls. He said, tell you what, I can help you take it down.
Like, this story is pure gold. Tell me one thing else.
That is so funny.
Exactly. And because you can tell that Norden thought it was a joke, this is just like one of the most charming things I've ever heard. Like, Norden's having a good time, Harbaugh's having a good time. Like, this is the way to recruit a player.
Yes. I don't know how you have an interaction like that and then not choose to follow that coach.
Exactly. And if you were wondering, Norden did sign with U of M.
Hey, there you go.
So clearly this gambit worked.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get more successful than that.
Yeah, I'm impressed with him. I think it's so out of the bag, and there is actually pictures, which we will post on our Twitter page, of Jim Harbaugh at his house. He went at 12:01. He didn't end up sleeping there, but apparently he stayed there pretty late, and there's a photo of them standing next to the TV while Netflix is turning on. Like, they're actually going to watch a movie together.
That's so funny.
Yeah, like, I don't know if they actually did go through with it, but I suspect they did. Yeah,
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Maybe it worked.
Cute story.
Maybe he didn't have to stay the night because he agreed to sign right then and there.
Exactly. And on top of that, Norden, in his inaugural season, beat the record for a length of a college football field goal.
Wow, so
it was a good recruit.
Yeah, dude knew what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone in that story knew what they were doing.
Yes. And also, this guy Norden just comes across as such a good guy.
Yeah, he's just telling this story and he's laughing.
Exactly.
He says what? Like, and I was just sitting there laughing.
Exactly.
I got Penn State stuff all over my wall.
Exactly.
Tell that to the University of Michigan.
I love it. Like, this everyone in this story comes across so well.
That's good.
So, in a story where he comes across a little bit less well, in another incident, also in 2016, also with a potential recruit, this time Isaiah Wilson. Isaiah Wilson was, at the time, a 5-star recruit. According to Wilson, something weird happened when he met with Jim at his house, which he explains as one of the reasons he did not end up playing for Michigan. Here's the quote from Wilson describing the incident.
Remember when Michigan first got the deal with Jordan? Isaiah began. Harbaugh just wouldn't take off his cleat. He came to my in-home visit with cleats on his feet, and I have hardwood floors, and he's just walking around with cleats, bro. After that, it was over.
Well, I'm not personally as offended by this as much as Wilson clearly is. It's pretty crazy to me that you don't take off your cleats for one recruit, but you're willing to sleep on the hardwood floors of another in the same year, both in 2016.
Well, I'll say, like, American culture opposed to Canadian culture is shoes on in the house.
That is fair. I'll give you that.
If he was just, like, happened to be wearing cleats and then you wear them in the house, I guess. But, like, cleats on hardwood, that's how you scratch them and mess up the floors, and you don't do that. That's wrong.
No,
cleats are an
I
outdoor
agree.
shoe.
I don't think you wear the cleats inside the house. I think it was a bad move, and I understand Wilson being upset with it. But if this was, like, the only reason he didn't pick U of M, that's a little ridiculous. I do understand if this was, like, the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, okay, like, maybe I'm going to vibe better on this other team. Like, he's a 5-star recruit. He has options.
Honestly, if he's a 5-star recruit with options, he only needs that one thing. Like, he sees that he has an insensitive coach, and he goes, I don't really want to go there.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
That's it. Boom, off the list.
We do have one last situation involving a recruit. This recruit is David Long. In this incident, apparently, not much details around it, Jim Harbaugh climbed a tree while meeting with this kid. Why this was done is a point of contention. Some have claimed it was a way to impress the recruit. Others believe it was a way of, endearing himself. Regardless, it worked. David Long signed with Michigan soon after the meeting.
Did he say why he climbed the tree? No one ever said?
It has never been commented on by Jim himself.
Yeah, but did no one ask David Long?
It's unclear. I couldn't find any direct explanation for why he climbed the tree. The only detail I got was they met, he climbed a tree. Keep in mind, he's not old, but he's also not young. All right, so the rest of the section is going to be a bit of a lightning round of just weird shit that Jim Harbaugh's done, because I could literally spend all day talking about this guy's quirks, because you guys are seeing now, we are not even halfway through these stories.
Yeah, dude's crazy.
Dude is crazy. And in one of the most beautifully infectious, adorable ways I've ever seen.
Yeah, dude's crazy in a super innocent way.
Exactly. This incident, also in 2016, big year for Jim Harbaugh quirks. During a Michigan game, fans started calling Harbaugh out for picking his nose and eating the booger on national television. There is a video of this incident. We will be watching it right now. Come on. He's picking his nose. He's eating the booger. We could dissect this like the Zapruder films. This is...
It is very clear cut. He sticks his thumb in his nose, he pulls out a booger, he sticks his thumb in his mouth, and he bites down on something.
It's very subtle, but it's also undeniable.
No, 100% undeniable.
Highly recommend every listener take a look at this video. After this incident took place, later on his radio show, speaking about these accusations, Jim is quoted as saying,
"I have never eaten a booger in my life."
After this, John Harbaugh, his brother, was also quoted as saying,
"My brother has never eaten a booger."
This situation is a doth protest too much situation if I've ever seen one. Are you kidding me? You have to say, I've never eaten a booger in my entire life. Bullshit. And then your brother has to double down. Never. He's never eaten a booger. Calm down. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
What are you trying to hide, man?
Yeah,
I swear I didn't kill her. Come on.
Yeah.
I think you killed her.
Someone's a serial nose picker.
Exactly. And you know what? It's gross, but I'm not going to cast too much judgment on him. It's his own body. In the next situation, this is kind of just a weird little... You'll see it. There's a video of Harbaugh jumping off a diving board at the University of Michigan. Here's the twist. In it, he's fully clothed.
Did he do it for a charity thing or a morale thing?
So the weird thing is, in the video, there are people surrounding him. There's definitely people watching it happen. There's someone filming it. But according to the reporting of SB Nation, this is at least the second time he has been seen jumping into the pool fully clothed. So maybe it was a motivational thing. Maybe it's something he does for his team members every year, whatever it is. But there's been no public explanation of it. All we know is that at least 2 times, probably more, he has jumped into the University of Michigan pool fully clothed, football coach gear on.
That is so funny.
Shoes on. There is a video of it, which will also be posted on our Twitter. Well, speaking about his clothes, no discussion of Jim Harbaugh's quirks would be complete without a mention of his infamous khakis. Do you have any idea about Jim's khakis?
No, I have no clue.
He has a bit of an infatuation with khakis. He wears them literally all the time, and we'll let him say his words for himself. Here is an interview from GQ where he expounds on his love of khakis. J. Cole and I will now reenact the conversation for you, where J. Cole is GQ and I will be Jim Harbaugh.
One of those objects of fascination in your wardrobe, we declared in our last issue, the pleated pants are back in.
Nice. Could you tell my wife that, Sarah Harbaugh? If you could just let her know that would be huge.
Do your game day khakis differ from your going out to dinner khakis or your lounge khakis?
No, just pretty much the same one. That's the best part about them. You can go anywhere and be dressed appropriately. Game day, or church, or out to dinner, the movies. I can work out in my khakis, and do. They're similar to sweatpants. Coaching, they're great because they've got pockets to put your pens and your scripts, chewing gum, etc.
So you'll go running in those?
Yeah, if I work out, I stay in the khakis.
And lounging?
All purpose.
The chameleon of the pant world.
They make me feel good too, like I have a uniform. I always liked having a uniform. Growing up, when I was playing baseball or hockey or football, always nice to have a uniform. Felt like part of the team.
And you don't have to worry about what to wear.
I believe it saves a good half hour to 45 minutes a day, not having to stand in front of the hangers and the drawers and figure out what to wear. You know what? He actually has a really I would say, solid defense as to why he wears khakis all the time. Like, I respect that answer.
I mean, if he can work out in them and he can run in them, then why not wear them 24/7?
I agree. Not like my personal preference.
No, me neither. I'm a sweatpants guy.
And I do think, like, it's objectively ridiculous to go running in khakis. Like, that is fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's like something you don't do.
It's such like a dad
Unless
move.
you're Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, exactly, of course. Like I was saying, it's such a dad move. Like, wearing the khakis to church, to lounging, to dinner, to coaching.
Movie
totally
theater,
makes sense.
yeah.
Where I draw my line is the exercising. Like, come on, bro. Throw on some shorts, throw on some sweatpants. Like, treat yourself better.
Yeah.
Treat the khakis better. They deserve it. Harbaugh has explained in other interviews that his obsession with khakis stems from the fact that one of his former coaches, when he was an assistant coach, always wore them and showed him how practical they are. So there is like a clear nostalgic value to them for him. Like, one of those guys he looked up to, he always wore khakis, so now Jim always wears khakis.
It makes sense. Like, you start in a pattern, you just get stuck in it.
Exactly. I totally respect it. It's obviously pretty quirky, though.
But yeah, especially another weird, innocent thing that just is weird, but also innocent.
Exactly. And one more thing that needs to be noted before we move on from these khakis is that Jim's wife, Sarah, has claimed in interviews that the khakis he wears are from Walmart and they cost $8.
That's great.
I just think that's pretty lovely for a man who gets paid. I think his salary is currently $16 million a year.
Wow, that's a nice little bit of money.
And I bet he's getting paid more at the University of Michigan.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Moving on to our next anecdote, Jim one time met the Pope. Upon meeting Pope Francis, he gifted him a Michigan football helmet and a pair of Jordan Retro 5s.
He gifted the Pope Jordan Retro 5.
Yeah, there's a photo of this, like him handing the Pope this shoebox with the Michigan helmet on top.
That's amazing.
Yeah, legend. Absolute legend.
Oh my god, do you think he ever wore them?
Oh, I hope so. Under the
God.
robe,
Yeah,
like, you
that's
just
what
don't
I
quite
mean.
see it. He like sits down and the robe rides up a little and you see it.
You just see the line of
Exactly.
the
Oh, those are Jordans. Those are fresh. In our next detail, when Harbaugh attends baseball games, he still brings a glove with him every time. Love the dichotomy of always wearing cleats. So when he goes to a baseball game, he's already wearing cleats and a mitt.
And I bet you he's wearing a baseball cap too, because
100%.
Yeah, so he could be ready to jump out on the field.
Exactly. Such 6-year-old boy energy. Like, oh, they're going to call me in. The coach is going to call me in.
Yeah, just
Right.
in case a foul ball comes my way, I have to have that glove.
Exactly. I love it. It's amazing. Another infamous detail about Jim Harbaugh is that he's not only obsessed with khakis, he's also obsessed with milk. This is like a really well-known fact about him. Many articles have been written about his dedication and love to milk. There are photos of him sitting at fancy steakhouses with a big glass of milk to complement his ribeye. This may relate to the overall odd eating habits we've seen associated with Harbaugh.
Yeah, that's quite peculiar.
Exactly. And if you want a little more detail on this milk obsession, here is a quote from Jim himself.
I take a vitamin every day, Harbaugh said on his radio show Monday night. It's called a steak. I truly believe the number 1 natural steroid is sleep. The number 2 natural steroid is milk. Whole milk, Harbaugh said. 3 would be water, 4 would be steak. Those are some pretty good tenets for life.
And you notice how chicken doesn't make the list.
Well, no, yeah, steak.
Of course not. In another incident, Harbaugh he tweeted at Judge Judy one time to congratulate her on a contract extension for her television show. The tweet reads as such.
Big congrats to Judge Judy on signing her contract extension through 2020 from a devout fan.
I thought that was pretty cute, you know, in case Judy was looking at her mentions and wanted to see some quick hype up from Jim himself.
Exactly. I would be pretty hyped if I saw that.
Exactly. Nothing
And I was
crazy.
Judge Judy.
Yeah, like nothing crazy, but it's quirky. It's quirky.
It's quirky.
And the last story we're going to be telling during this lightning round is that one time Harbaugh was given a dance lesson by Usher himself. Here is a video of him showing off his newly learned talents that we will be posting on the Twitter.
I bet you it looks better when there's music.
I bet you it looks better when Usher's the one doing it.
Yeah, that too.
Honestly, like I find this personally like a whole lot more endearing than anything else, but
Innocent and quirky.
it's innocent and quirky, and like the theme of this episode, innocent and quirky, if anything else. So that's the last of the quirks of Jim, but we're going to be moving on to this last final short section of the episode. And this is going to be quickly about conspiracies about Jim himself. Because there's a couple of things that he actually has no involvement in it himself, has nothing to do with the blackout or anything that he's done, but just things that football fans have theorized about him. Like I was saying, after being in the football world long enough, you're bound to have some conspiracy theories made where you are at the center of them. Of course, there are many theories surrounding Harbaugh's actions during the Super Bowl blackout or the U of M sign-stealing scandal, but the theories that we're about to be discussing are a lot less based in evidence than either of those. The first speculation is that Harbaugh was forced into coaching the Chargers by the NFL. The reasoning behind this is that he only landed 2 interviews with other NFL teams after leaving U of M last year. This is highly unusual for a coach of his level as prestige. Additionally, the team, the Chargers, chose to pay him $16 million in salary, when they paid their last 3 coaches $12 million combined.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. He's getting paid 25% more than what they paid their last 3 coaches in combination. These are big dogs. Their last coach was Sean McVay.
Yeah.
Yeah, these aren't random dudes.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, that's big money.
Exactly. There are rumors that Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the league, pulled some strings to make sure Jim ended up in LA. That being said, I personally cannot think of what the motivation would have been to do this. J. Cole, you got any ideas?
No, I'm trying to think of, I'm trying to come up with my own conspiracy theory, and I can't think of anything of why. Why the Chargers,
I agree. It's weak tea. I saw it written in a couple places, so I felt like I had to include it, but it's just, there's no substance.
That's weak.
Yeah, it's
that's
really
weak.
nothing there. Yeah, to me, the only fishy part about this is the fact that, the best explanation for his lack of interviews is because Jim was still pretty tainted from, the sign-stealing scandal that happened months before, It's very recent history.
Yeah, I guess maybe they didn't, but even still, he had the pedigree as an NFL coach, and then he went to college and was just as good, if not better.
Exactly.
And then...
Yep.
Yeah.
No matter what, it's weak tea.
Yeah, that's bad.
The next theory and the last we'll be discussing is perfect fodder for our podcast. We are going to be dubbing it the 34 conspiracy. This TikTok from Riley Biller seems to have originated this, and we're going to show it now because she's going to do a whole lot better at explaining it than I ever could.
There's a super weird correlation between the Harbaugh brothers and their dad with the number 34. Let me explain. So John Harbaugh, Jack Harbaugh, and now Jim Harbaugh all won their championship games scoring 34 points. John against his brother in the Super Bowl, Jim just last week with Michigan, and their dad Jack in the FCS National Championship with Western Kentucky, 34 again. But it doesn't stop there. Jim Harbaugh got his first real coaching job when he was 34 years old. John Harbaugh's first coaching job, 34 years old. John Harbaugh became a dad for the first time at 34 years old, which I'm not going to show her face. And Jim, well, you guessed it, 34 years old. So if I was a betting man, I would probably put that the Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl by scoring 34 points if you think they're going to win the Super Bowl.
I love it. I love it. It's perfect.
Yeah, that is great. And if this is for this upcoming season, I'm putting all my money on Ravens Super Bowl right now.
I don't know. I feel like this TikTok was made for us. Whenever numerology enters the chat, my ears perk up immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Coincidences and numbers are just, the greatest.
Yeah, exactly. Because, the most obviously disprovable, right? It's just, oh, that's such bull. You found a bunch of 34s repeating through their lives, and none of them are even that weird. One of them is, he became a dad at 34. Therefore, they're going to win the Super Bowl with 34 points.
Yeah,
what?
No, because no person has ever become a father at 34
Exactly.
years old.
A super normal age to become a father.
Yeah, exactly. What?
Yeah, it's crazy. And I love the detail at the end where she goes, you should probably put a bet for them to win 34 points if you think they're going to win the Super Bowl. It's like you just
Yeah.
disqualified your entire theory. Isn't the theory meant to be that they're going to make it to the Super Bowl, get 34 points, and win? Not just if you think they're going to make it to the Super Bowl and you think they're going to win that game, they're going to win it with 34 points.
Exactly.
Because, like, you're really hedging your bets on that one. If that's the extent of your theory, then yeah, you're probably going to be right because they're probably not going to make it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what do you think of the ongoing legacy of Jim Harbaugh?
I think he's a crazy but innocent dude.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm excited to see what he does with the Chargers. Shout out to my boy Matt. He's a big Chargers guy.
Of course, yes.
But no, for real though, they've gotten a bunch of powerful runners,
Yes.
and Jim Harbaugh's a big run guy. And Justin Herbert's been very limited by his coaches and wide receivers, and now it's just being limited by his wide receivers.
Exactly.
So,
and, like, the only
I think-
change in his game is going to be the fact that he won't be able to eat chicken anymore.
Exactly. So I think I'm excited to see what Jim does with the Chargers. Honestly.
Me too. I think there's a lot of potential in that team.
Yeah.
And I guess my last question is, do you understand why I felt so compelled to dedicate an entire episode to Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah. I mean, this is gonna be one of our longer episodes, and totally worth it because this is wild.
Exactly. And, like, on top of this, there's probably, like, a couple stories that I had to cut from this because there was just so much good content about this guy. But I think this does a really good job of explaining who this man is and really giving a look at what a very innocent side of conspiracy thinking might lead to, and just the general quirks of a man that have absolutely nothing to do with his overall beliefs.
Welcome, listeners, to my segment of the podcast where I delve deep into the bizarre and unexplained occurrences that make you question the reality that is the NFL. I've got some mind-bending stories and stats that will have you reaching for your tinfoil hat in no time. So this is kind of just hilarious and super random, but also I totally get where this guy is coming from and would totally do the same thing.
You got me very, very intrigued.
All right. So, did you know that there was a comic book series published by Marvel Comics centered on Phil Grayfield, an ex-NFL player who survives a freak accident and wears an indestructible football uniform? He goes by the name of NFL Super Pro.
That's like the superhero name. NFL Super Pro.
NFL Super Pro is the name.
Who's his villain? Like the Cowboys?
I'll get into everything in a bit. So this was produced in collaboration with the NFL, originally written by Fabian Nicieza and artist Jose Delbo. The series started publication in 1991 and ended after 12 issues. So the story went as such. An aspiring football player has his career ended when he saves a child, and he suffers a horrific knee injury. He becomes a sports reporter and interviewed an eccentric football fan who also happened to be a scientist. The scientist designed a new, almost indestructible football uniform, which has been molded on an individual basis and cost $5 million to construct.
So pretty much this guy was like, you know that guy Iron Man? What if we made him NFL themed? Am I wrong? Some rich scientist gave him a big suit that made him strong.
Iron Man, I won't be the first to say Iron Man is more than the suit. He is also a fucking genius.
Yes,
billionaire.
Hear me out.
This dude was an NFL player who got injured, is now a sports reporter, and meets a scientist.
And wait, sorry, did I miss something? He got injured by saving a child. He didn't get injured on the field, right?
No.
He got injured by saving a child.
When he saved a child from falling, he suffered a horrific knee injury. But I wanna keep going into why
for sure.
This story. So suddenly, interrupting the interview, thieves raid the superfan's house, overwhelm the two of them, steal a van load of NFL merchandise, but not the uniform, and torch the building.
Was OJ with them?
Grayfield, who is tied up and helpless, knocks over experimental chemicals, which, in combination with the fire and ultra-rare football souvenirs going up in flames, he does not incinerate. He turns into a superhero.
This is amazing.
So, NFL Super Pro was released starting in October of 1991. And the final issue released in September of 1992.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could have guessed that.
NFL Super Pro has made 2 crossovers into the main Marvel universe. In Spider-Man in a number 1 issue, and in Captain America in a number 1 issue.
No way. Wait, so like, when are we gonna see him in the MCU?
So we might get an offline. Because there was a character named Stiltman. Yes, I swear, there was a character named Stiltman. And he says, quote, "I beat up a guy called Super Pro last week. Silliest looking dude." Yeah, so NFL Super Pro is considered one of Marvel's worst comics and has become a cult object. Because why wouldn't it? A Marvel NFL comic?
Like owning a copy of that would be so funny.
So the creator of the series and the original writer, Fabian, admitted that he only wrote the story to gain free NFL tickets.
Did he get them?
Yes.
Good for him. That's legendary.
Yeah, in 2005, the Chicago Sports Review called it perhaps the worst comic book ever created.
Yeah, I think that might be right. Haven't read it, but that sounds like it could be a fair evaluation.
So we have supporting characters. Okay. Yeah, so we have Ken Reed, who's the cameraman that accompanies his Super Pro's alter ego, Phil Grayfield. So he's kind of like the Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, sure.
You have Jane Dixon, the former girlfriend, who is the only person who knows his identity.
Wow, this is really original.
You have the protectors of the forest, the defenders of the Brazilian rainforest. You have an repulsor, an armor-wielding ex-football player. And you have the Happy Campers, a superhero team with 4 members. The Almighty Dollar, Streak, Girth, and Calculator.
Wait, those are the hardest names I've ever heard. Are you kidding me? Girth and Calculator?
So Almighty Dollar shoots pennies with his hands. Streak has super speed. Girth can hit people with his belly. And Calculator can do math equations in his head super quickly.
That's such like a normal thing people can do.
So his villains include crime boss Marco Senzione, whose dealings are constantly thwarted by Super Pro. You have Carl Jennings, a former football player who used an experimental form of steroids. You have Quick Kick, a field goal kicker turned evil ninja. Instant Replay, an assassin with the ability to travel short distances through time, which that's kind of
sick, yeah.
And you have Karagon, a man who owns a camp to find your inner hero, but is really trying to figure out how to give people superpowers.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is a real-life comic book series that once existed and everyone hated because it was terrible.
This is the second thing that one of your after segments have made me want to buy. This is still sitting number 2. This comic book is sitting number 2 behind a Tonawanda Cardex jersey.
Yeah, honestly, that's a hard find if you can find one of those NFL Pro. It doesn't matter if it's issue 1 or issue 12.
No, it doesn't make a difference, yeah.
Please give me one.
Exactly. If anyone owns one, reach out to us, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to see a picture. Thank you for listening to this week's episode.
You can find us on Twitter at FB Conspiracies, where we will post all the graphics and links we spoke about during this episode.
You can also reach us by email using fbconspiracies@gmail.com.
A special thanks to Blaze for the music.
If you enjoyed, consider leaving a review.
Join us next week for more football conspiracies. guest speaker come on. His name is Jared Smith. Jared, can you say hi?
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this fine evening?